Hey guys, welcome, and settle in. Take a deep breath, and let the sound of the city fade into the background. Tonight, we'll walk together through a London long gone. A London of gaslight and soot, where chimneys coughed black clouds into a grey sky, and the Thames moved like a dark, restless vein through the heart of the city. This is not the London of postcards or romance, not the shining capital of empire and progress. No, this is the London of slums and sweatshops, of narrow alleys, slick with rain, and rooms where entire families slept beside the fire that barely warmed them. Before we begin, take a moment to get comfortable, to loosen your shoulders, to rest your eyes. If you find yourself drifting off as we go, that's perfectly all right. That's what this journey is, for a slow drift through history, through lives long extinguished but never truly forgotten. And as we travel through the quiet corridors of time together, if you enjoy these soft explorations of history, these gentle stories of the human past, consider leaving a like, a comment, or even subscribing to this channel. It helps this peaceful corner of the internet stay alive, and brings a little calm learning to others who might need it tonight. Now, let's draw closer to the fire. You can almost feel the faint warmth against your palms. Outside, the fog curls against the window panes, thick, pale, endless. And through that mist, you can just make out the sound of footsteps, small ones, quick. They belong to a child, and with them begins our first story. Why it sucked to be a factory child. Imagine waking before dawn, not because you want to, but because a whistle has screamed somewhere in the darkness. You sit up, rubbing your eyes with small hands still rough from yesterday's work. The room smells of damp wool and coal smoke. Your breath fogs in the cold morning air. This is London sometime around 1840. You are perhaps 9, or 10, or maybe younger. It doesn't matter much. Your childhood has been traded, piece by piece, for a few pennies a week. The factory looms beyond the row of crooked houses. Its chimney smokes before the sun rises, its windows flickering like dull orange eyes in the fog. You and hundreds of others file in barefoot, shawls wrapped tight, your feet sinking into the mud thickened with ash. Inside, the air is already heavy with lint and dust. The smell of oil, metal, and sweat clings to everything. Rows of machines grind and shudder, spinning frames, power looms, and flywheels that never seem to stop. The noise is constant. It fills the head until thought becomes a distant, flickering thing. You don't speak because you can't be heard. You don't look away because one slip, one moment of carelessness could cost you a finger or a hand. And yet, you keep going. Hour after hour, day after day. Your overseer watches with eyes sharp as the iron hooks on the wall. He carries a stick, not often used, but never forgotten. If you slow, he notices. If you cough too much, he notices. If you collapse, he sighs. Because it will take time to drag you aside and find someone smaller to take your place. Breaks are rare. Lunch, when it comes, is a crust of bread, sometimes dipped in tea, sometimes not. You eat quickly, sitting on the edge of the floor, watching the motes of lint drift in the air like tiny, pale snowflakes. Then the whistle blows again. By the time you return home, the city is dark once more. You can't tell if it's night or just the smoke that makes it so. The streets are alive with noise. Barrowmen shouting, horses clattering, and the faint cries of vendors selling roasted chestnuts or cheap gin. Your mother stirs a thin stew. Your father coughs in his sleep. You curl up beside the hearth, and for a few hours, you forget the factory's roar. But the rhythm of the machines lingers. Even in dreams you hear it. That endless turning, that dull, mechanical heartbeat of progress. And yet, for all its cruelty, the factory also represents something strange, something unprecedented in human history. It is the dawn of industrial modernity, a world where time is measured not by sun and season, but by whistle and clock, where a child's hands, once meant for play or craft, now turn gears that feed a growing empire. Some found pride in their work, small as it was. Some found companionship, a shared endurance, in the dim light of the mill. But for most, Life was simply motion, a rhythm dictated by others, an existence swallowed by the endless hum of progress. And as we leave the factory behind, as the smoke thins and the machinery fades into silence, we find ourselves stepping out into the damp streets of Victorian London again. The lamps flicker, the fog rolls low, and somewhere, in a narrow garret above a printing press, a man named Charles Dickens begins to write. Imagine yourself stepping into London, sometime around the 1840s. The fog clings to your clothes like damp wool. It is not the kind of mist you see in the countryside. This one smells faintly of coal, soot, and the slow decay of horse manure washed into the street gutters. The gas lamps shimmer weakly through it, halos of amber light hovering over the cobblestones. You can hear the Thames before you see it, sluggish, heavy, and dark as ink. This is not the romantic London of postcards or paintings. This is the London Charles Dickens knew, the London that breathed through soot. When Dickens was a child, the Industrial Revolution was in full roar. The city's population was doubling, then doubling again. Rows upon rows of cramped brick housing stretched across Southwark, Lambeth, and Whitechapel hastily built, often without proper drains, ventilation, or even windows that opened. The air itself had a weight to it. Factories, breweries, and foundries coughed out smoke day and night. Everything, the curtains, the laundry, even the faces of children seemed to wear a fine layer of dust. The sound of industry was constant. Gears grinding, hammers striking, the groan of carts heavy with coal. In such a place, childhood had no softness. Dickens's own father was sent to debtor's prison when Charles was just 12 to help support his family. He was sent to work in a blacking factory, pasting labels on bottles of shoe polish for 12 hours a day. He would later recall the humiliation of it. The rats, the smell of glue, the endless repetition. It was this world, the blurred line between child and laborer, that shaped his imagination forever. From misery to manuscript. Years later, when Dickens began to write, he didn't have to invent poverty. He simply remembered it. The London he described in Oliver Twist and Bleak House was not fantasy. It was documentary, disguised as fiction. The orphanages, the workhouses, Tegrim clerks, they were all real. The characters' names may have been changed, but the desperation was not. He would walk 4 miles at night through the city, observing, listening, absorbing, the way a candle flickered in a fogged window, the way policemen's boots splashed in alley puddles, the way the cries of hawkers and beggars echoed between the walls like a song that never ended. If you could follow him on one of those midnight walks, you'd find him drifting through neighborhoods most gentlemen avoided, through the maze of Fleet Ditch, the reeking passageways by Holborn, the shadowed arches near Waterloo Bridge. He wrote of the poor not as curiosities, but as human beings. That alone, in his time, was radical. The theater of the streets. To Dickens, the city itself was alive, a character with moods, tempers, and secrets. He saw beauty in its contradictions. The same London that smelled of sewage and coal dust also glimmered with innovation. The telegraph lines were going up. The first trains thundered through stations like new gods of iron. Gaslights flickered to life along the Strand. The poor and the rich walked the same pavements, but they lived in entirely different worlds. And yet, for Dickens, both worlds belonged to the same city. He moved his between them, attending lavish dinners in Mayfair one evening, then slipping into a slum by the docks the next. The contrast became the engine of his art. He saw how progress, those shining new machines, came at a human cost, how the wealth of empire rested on weary hands, how behind every chandelier there was a chimney sweep. London, the mirror of conscience. Dickens used his stories as a mirror, one that forced readers to look at what society preferred to ignore. But he never shouted or accused. He simply showed them, the child starving beside a bakery window, the clerk crushed under endless paperwork, the woman whose dreams dissolved into factory dust. Through gentle persistence, his words changed how people thought. New laws followed. Public outrage grew. The slums did not vanish overnight, but the conversation had begun. Even now, if you walk through modern London, traces of Dickens as a city remain. A crooked alley here, a fading brick facade there. The ghosts of chimney boys and street urchins still linger, unseen but not forgotten. And so, as the fog deepens around us, we drift from Dickens' pen to the very bowels of his city, to the part most people preferred never to see. Beneath the cobblestones, under the markets and the tenements, another London was being built, a hidden network of tunnels and drains that would change the fate of millions. Beneath the crowded streets of Victorian London lies another world, silent, damp, and dimly lit. You wouldn't notice it as you walked above, the cobblestones echoing with carriage wheels, the chatter of market sellers, the cries of chimney sweeps. But if you were to peel back the layers of pavement, bricks, and soil, you'd find something unexpected, a cathedral of tunnels, arched in brick, endlessly winding, carrying the waste of a restless empire. This was London's hidden revolution, not fought with rifles or slogans, but with mortar, sweat, and an almost holy sense of practicality. A city choked by its own success. For centuries, London had grown without pause. In 1800, it was already the largest city in Europe, a metropolis swollen by the promise of the Industrial Revolution. But that growth came faster than its systems could handle. Houses stacked upon houses, alleys narrowing into shadow, streams that once flowed clear turned to open sewers, and fields that once fed the city became graveyards for waste. Imagine the smell. It was not one scent, but a symphony of decay. Coal smoke mingled with rot, river mud mixed with human refuse, tannery acid blending with the sweetness of spilled ale. The air had weight to it, as if it pressed upon your lungs. People lived alongside it, because they had to. A woman might hang laundry over a yard where runoff from the privy formed dark puddles. A child might play beside a drainage ditch alive with insects, and when night fell, the smell only thickened, clinging to curtains, to hair, to dreams. The River Thames, once a source of pride, had become a ribbon of poison. It shimmered darkly beneath the bridges, sluggish and swollen, carrying London's sins out toward the sea, or so people hoped. But the truth was, it carried them right back in, for the same water that bore away filth was also pumped back into homes as drinking water. And thus began the cycle of sickness. The silent enemy, cholera. Cholera came quietly. It did not march or roar. It whispered through the wells and pipes, unseen and unstoppable. Entire families would fall ill within days. Streets that were lively in the morning could be hushed by nightfall. Theories abounded. Some said it was the hand of God. Others blamed the bad air miasma rising from the river. Few yet understood that the true killer was not the smell, but the water itself. One man, a doctor named John Snow, began to suspect as much. In 1854, during another devastating outbreak, he mapped the cases around Broad Street and traced them to a single water pump. When the handle was removed, the deaths slowed. His discovery that water, not air, spread disease was quietly revolutionary. But in the moment, few listened, and so the suffering continued until the river itself rebelled. The Great Stink of 1858. The summer of 1858 was merciless. Weeks of heat baked the Thames into something beyond foul. The river shrank, thickened, curdled into an open wound through the heart of the city. Ink dark, it shimmered with oily colors and frothed with decay. Newspapers wrote that it smelled of 1,000 open graves. Inside Parliament, the odor was so overwhelming that curtains were soaked in chloride of lime. Windows were shuttered. But the smell could not be denied. It pressed in like a presence, a physical thing. Lawmakers fled their chambers gagging, their debates silenced by the stench of their own neglect. And for the first time, the crisis could not be ignored. The Great Stink, as it was called, achieved what decades of reformers and doctors had not. It forced the government to act. Joseph Bazalgette and the Hidden Revolution. Into this chaos stepped a quiet man, Sir Joseph Bazalgette. And engineered by training, Bazalgette was not a politician or a visionary in the poetic sense. He was practical, meticulous, and deeply compassionate in his own reserved way. He saw the city's suffering not as a mystery, but as a problem to be solved through design. His plan was astonishingly ambitious, a network of more than 1,000 miles of main sewers, and thousands more in smaller connecting lines. These vast tunnels would collect every drop of waste from homes and streets and carry it far downstream, beyond the city's reach. He imagined the system as a living organism. Arteries and veins beneath the ground, pulsing with the flow of London's life. Construction began in 1859. It was dangerous, back-breaking work. Men labored by lamplight, waist-deep in mud, breathing lime dust and methane. The tunnels were hot in summer, freezing in winter, and the constant drip of water created a rhythm, steady, hypnotic, endless. Some workers died, many fell. Yet the work continued, day after day, brick by brick. And Bazalgette, ever the perfectionist, built his tunnels larger than necessary for the future, he said. He knew that London would grow, and he refused to let it choke again. It would take nearly 2 decades to complete the full system. The subterranean city. When at last the sewers opened, they were unlike anything the world had ever seen. Standing in one of Bazalgette's main tunnels was like being in a vast underground cathedral, the ceilings high and vaulted, the brickwork patterned with perfect precision, the air cool and still. Water moved through them not as a torrent, but as a slow, steady current, the heartbeat of a healthier city. Above ground, the change came quietly. The river began to clear. The smell faded. Outbreaks of cholera stopped almost completely. The city exhaled for the first time in a century. Yet the irony remained. The most important structure in Victorian London could not be seen. There were no parades, no statues, no songs. The gratitude was silent, but enduring. The quiet legacy. Even now, more than 150 years later, much of Bazalgette's system still functions. His foresight, his care for detail, his unwillingness to compromise, all continue to carry the waste of modern London, silently, tirelessly. If you were to walk those tunnels today, perhaps guided by a faint lantern glow, you'd find something unexpectedly peaceful. The sound of water lapping against brick, the distant echo of footsteps long gone, the air, thick but calm, filled with a sense of quiet purpose. It is easy to forget that beneath every civilization lies its hidden machinery, the work that keeps life bearable. Down here, surrounded by stone and water, you feel it most clearly. The humility of human progress, the awareness that grandeur, above all, depends on what is unseen below. Inside a gentleman's club, decadence, empire, and the illusion of civility. The night in London is not cemented breaths. The kind of breath that carries both history and exhaustion. A heaviness floats through the air, made of smoke, fog, and the scent of damp stone. Pall Mall glows faintly beneath the mist, lamps flickering like watchful eyes, as if guarding something sacred and secret. Somewhere behind the wrought iron gates, beyond doors thick enough to silence the city, lies a world that pretends time has stopped. A sanctuary for those who once ruled it. Inside, there changes. It grows warmer, thicker, slower. Every breath tastes faintly of leather, tobacco, and old brandy. The glow of the fireplace dances across wood panels and gilded mirrors, flickering like the memory of better days. Boots press into Persian rugs, soft enough to erase sound. The hum of conversation barely exists, a thread of voices murmuring beneath the crackle of fire. In this room, stillness has a sound. A butler glides across the floor, silent as mist. His hands move with mechanical precision, refilling a glass before the owner even realizes it is empty. He has served this club longer than most members have been alive. He knows who arrives early, who stays late, whose laughter means real joy, and whose means deflection. Yet he remains invisible, seen only when needed, remembered only when missed. In these halls, discretion is the highest art. At a table near the fire, 2 men play chess. Their conversation is languid, like smoke curling upward from a pipe. The markets are uneasy, one says. Naturally, replies the other. India will hold, murmurs the first. Of course, says his friend. The words drift lazily through the air, carrying the weight of certainty. It is not a debate, it is ritual. Each sentence reaffirms the illusion that the empire, like the club itself, will endure forever. This is how empires truly breathe, not in speeches or wars, but in quiet rooms where power disguises itself as politeness. Every gentleman here believes he is civilized, and civilization, to him, means restraint. No shouting, no sweat, no display of passion. Control is everything. Emotion belongs to the streets outside. Inside these walls, even joy must whisper. Each club has its tribe and its character. The Athenaeum for scholars, where Darwin and Dickens once dined beneath frescoed ceilings. The Reform for liberals, the Carlton for conservatives, the Garrick for actors and playwrights who wished to feel respectable. Yet all shared one sacred law: exclusivity. No women, no noise, no poverty, no questions. Within these rules lay the comfort of the belief that some men were born to belong, and others were born to wait outside. To enter a club like this was not merely to join it, was to be acknowledged. It meant you were part of the quiet machinery of empire, one of the few permitted to shape the world while pretending to do nothing at all. A gentleman's civility did not come from kindness, but from mastery of words, of posture, of silence. The less you revealed, the more power you were presumed to have. Even laughter here had boundaries, confined to the volume of good breeding. The architecture itself was designed to remind men of their insignificance. Ceilings arched high above, swallowing sound. Corridors stretched like tunnels into the past. Oil paintings of forgotten lords stared down with eyes that had seen centuries pass. Every surface gleamed with a kind of authority mahogany. Brass, velvet all, polished by invisible hands that belonged to people who would never sit in these rooms. The club was not just a building. It was a theater of control. Servants glided like shadows, performing their choreography without fault. They lit lamps, polished silver, folded newspapers, and adjusted the fire. They were witnesses to the empire's true form, not glory or conquest, but habit. Each of them knew that revolutions could be planned in this room, that kingdoms could be discussed between sips of cognac, and yet they were as unseen as the foundations of the city itself. Outside, London was changing. The fog thickened, not from mystery, but from coal. The air was heavy with smoke from factories, their chimneys drawing new skylines in black strokes. Streets filled with workers' men, women, children faces, smudged eyes, tired. The rhythm of the city was faster now, louder, less obedient, but inside the clubs, time seemed to move slower, as though etiquette could halt progress through sheer will. The fog outside became a metaphor for denial. It blurred egas and softened truth. It allowed the gentlemen within to believe that their world remained untouched, that the empire was eternal, and that civility still meant superiority. They read newspapers filled with unrest and starvation, but discussed only hunting seasons and colonial profits. The discomfort of the world was kept at a polite distance, like an unpleasant odor excluded by the club's perfumed air. Their conversations were acts of comfort, not governance. The workers grow restless, one might say. Indeed, another would reply, pouring brandy. But the system holds. They toasted stability as if it were a moral achievement, blind to the storms forming outside their windows. To them, power was not something you displayed, it was something you quietly inherited. By the late 19th century, the illusion began to fray. The empire was still vast, but its confidence had begun to tremble. The colonies cost more to control. Newspapers printed dissent faster than ministers could suppress it. Steamships moved faster than bureaucracy. The world was changing too quickly for the club's slow rituals to contain it, and so those rituals became more rigid. Dinner at 7, port at 9. Silence after 11. The clock became their shield. The rooms themselves seemed to sense decay. The air felt heavier, the light dimmer, the walls too thick for the new century's hum. The portraits on the wall no longer inspired reverence. They looked weary, as though embarrassed by the present. Yet still, the men sat beneath them, holding to their traditions as if etiquette could stop erosion. Imagine the sound, the low crackle of the fireplace, the soft rustle of a newspaper, the gentle clink of glass against glass. Each sound a declaration that order still existed, that refinement could outlast chaos. But it couldn't. Outside, the city pulsed with new energy. Trains howled through tunnels, voices rose in protest. The streets no longer bowed to silence. When the 20th century arrived, the illusion collapsed, slowly, elegantly. Empires fell not with thunder, but with sighs. Colonies declared independence. Women won the vote. Workers gained rights once dismissed as absurd. The empire's foundation, built on the quiet assumption of superiority, had begun to crumble. Yet inside the clubs, old men still sat by the fire, polishing their spectacles and pretending not to notice. Their conversations soft, nostalgia replacing conviction. "We once ruled half the world," one would murmur. "Yes," another would say, "and it was ... civilized." Their glasses trembled in their hands. They spoke of empire the way one speaks of youth, fondly, but with disbelief. The fog outside had lifted, revealing a world they no longer recognized. The clubs persisted as museums of habit, the same chairs, the same menus, the same silence. The butlers, aged and retired. Their sons took their places, inheriting invisibility like a family trade. And though the empire was gone, the manners of empire lingered, polite, exclusive, quietly certain of their own importance. It was not power anymore. It was nostalgia dressed as dignity. Even now, some of these clubs remain. The plaques are polished, the doors guarded by men in tailored coats. They are quieter than ever. Inside, conversations have changed, less about colonies, more about memory. Yet the same air lingers, that mix of entitlement and melancholy, the faint perfume of a world that refuses to admit it ended long ago. If you step inside, you can still feel it, the weight of ritual, the discipline of silence. The fire still burns, though the smoke is faint. The portraits still watch, though their eyes are tired. And beneath the hum of conversation, if you listen closely, you can almost hear the ghost of empire breathing softly in the corner. Because civility was never the same as virtue. Empire was never the same as civilization. What they built here was not greatness, it was theater. A long, rehearsed illusion performed to make conquest sound polite. Every rule, every ritual, every naturally, and of course, was part of the act. They called it refinement. History calls it denial. The night deepens over London. The fog presses once more against Pall Mall's stone facades. Inside, a final servant extinguishes the lamps, one by one. The silence returns, familiar and absolute. The last gentleman closes his newspaper, stands, and pauses. For a moment, he looks at the fire, as if waiting for it to speak. Then he turns, opens a door, and disappears into the fog. The room remains empty, perfect, untouched. The air still smells of smoke and brandy and old certainty. Somewhere beyond the walls, a train screams. A child laughs. A woman's voice carries through the mist. The city is alive, indifferent, free. The fire has long since gone out. What remains is the faint smell of ash and old books, the lingering echo of laughter from another century. In a quiet aftermath, one begins to wonder, what was it all for? The gentlemen built their world upon rituals and reason, upon order and lineage. They believed in progress, but only the kind they could control. Their civility, so carefully curated, was never about kindness. It was about boundaries. Boundaries between class and poverty, between ruler and ruled, between human and subject. They called it empire. But what it truly was distance. Distance from consequence. Distance from compassion. A life so polished, so rehearsed, that it mistook performance for truth. Perhaps that is why their legacy feels like smoke tangible one moment, gone at the next. You can still trace its scent in old institutions, in marble halls, in quiet policies, in the way power still cloaks itself in politeness. The empire may have ended, but the illusion it crafted still whispers through the corridors of modern life. We still build clubs. Digital ones now. Places where the powerful gather unseen. We still curate civility, mistaking it for virtue. We still prefer comfort to confrontation, prestige, to justice. And maybe, deep down, we still crave that same illusion of control, that same warm firelight against the cold, uncertain world outside. But history has a way of listening, even to silence. It waits, patiently, for truth to surface. And truth always does. In the end, those gentlemen did not lose their empire in one grand moment. It faded, slowly, beautifully, like candlelight dying in a hall, too large for its own glow. They vanished as quietly as they lived. And in that stillness, we see a mirror. Because the illusion of civility, the comfort of belonging, the temptation to remain untouched, those things did not die with them. They live in USA, and it is up to us to decide whether to repeat the performance, or to finally step outside and face the fog. The streets of London still hum beyond Pall Mall. The lamps flicker where carriages once rolled, and if you listen closely, beneath the murmur of engines and footsteps, you might still hear it, the soft clink of glass, the rustle of newspapers, the whisper of a vanished world, convincing itself it would last forever. But the world moves on, always. And perhaps that is the final mercy of history, that no illusion, no empire, no gentleman's club can outlast the truth. Good night, London. Sleep well beneath your fog and your ghosts. Tomorrow, the light will find you again.